recording, redirecting to Facebook Live page. I've done this before. And I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this live event, in this case, which is the last episode of TWV, the podcast. In this second season, we call it Bridging the Gap because we invited amazing, incredible artists from amazing, incredible companies. Somehow I was going to say websites, but no, companies, in order to tell us how they work in those companies, what is the training that they thought they missed in order to work on those companies, and they've been sharing with us for 10 or 11 weeks. And next week is the last one, and I am going to be closing this second term with something that all the teachers somehow has been touching upon, which is performance presence. I remember the last one, Josh Baker, who is teaching right now this week, talking about that we should link the training of the technique training into the performance technique. And Rob Hayden from Ultima Vez, former dancer from Ultima Vez, was saying that his main training is about performance presence. So it's something that it's really current at the moment. And because the last 20 years have been researching about what is that performance presence, how can be replicated, and because I might be a control freak or I come from sports science or both, I created a methodology of training performance presence, almost like, if you want to be fitter or you want to run, you know that you have to do certain number of series, and then you need to do in this progression, this periodization, etc., etc., etc. So we created a methodology, and I say we because I had incredible help of people such as the people that I have with us today in order to create this methodology, and that we're going to be talking about it today and how those classes are going to be next week. And because I cannot interview myself, Bridget Lappin, assistant director of Towards Vivencia, and I thought, okay, let's invite people who has been in touch with this methodology in different ways for us to have a conversation about it, how impacted in their lives, how was the very beginning of it, all about it. So today, I'm really happy to have, of course, Bridget Lappin, which is the assistant director. He's going to be our master of ceremony, kind of like moderating this conversation. If anyone is talking too much, Bridget, you will have all the power. Like, yeah, enough, fine, whatever.
Gotcha.
Then we have with us the gorgeous Molly Danter. Molly is someone that I know for many years. We've ever encountered each other in different institutions, first at the place and then at SITS, Salzburg Experimental Academy of Dance in Austria. And she's someone that I really cherish, someone we have incredible conversations every time that we meet, and I just love talking to her. And she was one of our participants of Towards Vivencia. I don't remember which edition. She will tell us later on. And then we have my dear friend, one of my first husbands, Nathan Johnston. He was first when he was young, and when I was young as well, he was my student at the place. And as soon as he finished, it was really nice connection, really nice chemistry. So I asked him to be my assistant choreographer for the first piece that I made on Edge, the postgraduate company at the place. And that was called at that time 36. It was a crazy journey. It was in the middle of my research, so all that ideas of performance presence was tested in that piece. We have an incredible time, and the piece was very successful to the point that now it's called 12, and it's still touring the world in two different companies, Acosta Danza and the National Company of Malta. So first and foremost, Molly, Nathan, and Bridget, thank you so much for joining us, spending a bit of time, and really looking forward for this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here.
So Bridget, over to you.
Fab. Thank you very much. And also, I just want to say thank you to Molly and Nathan for being here. And then also Jorge for taking the time to kind of like be a little bit of Wizard of the Oz and like put the curtain away and reveal the wizard behind the curtain. So thanks for being here. Let's start with Nathan. Just because you were quite early on in the process of Jorge developing this process of Towards Avencia. So can you tell us a little bit about that first piece that the two of you were working on together?
Yes, I can. Um, so yeah, it was I just graduated, right? I think I just graduated. Then Jorge asked me to be assistant choreographer for the piece, and it was kind of the beginning of my artistic journey. I guess it really shaped me in a lot of ways, and it still has. And I think I remember I had this notebook, and it was just full of all these like notes and patterns and rhythms and all these things put together. It was like, and I'd never had to kind of document something so in depth before. Um, so it really changed the way that I started to think about performance, and it's definitely something I've carried through as a performer, my whole performance career. But not only that, but the way I choreograph, the way I teach, um, is very much impacted by that very first piece. And it was a very tough piece as well. I remember it was very physically demanding, mentally demanding, and it's kind of like these 20 minutes, because I've also performed in it as well. These 20 minutes, even though we were there, it felt like I just run a marathon, and it's 20 minutes.
Can you explain a little bit of what the piece is about, just in case no one's ever seen it before and knows the chaos that ensues on stage as a result of the circumstances that the piece is created under?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this was back when it was 36. There was this idea of, it was 12 performers, and 36 bottles of water. Sounds so simple, but it wasn't. And basically the piece came about, and it was built from a series of tasks. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tasks that keep you. I don't want to say present, because that's like the key word, but it does keep you present. And I remember that these tasks, you had to keep thinking and decision making, and keep aware, or these bottles are flying across the stage, and you had to be constantly aware, because it wasn't ever quite set. So if I want to throw a bottle to someone, I'd have to just shout their name, and they'd have to be ready. So there's this element of you were not sure what's going to happen, so you have to be really aware what's going on. And um, it was built so that some section would change every night in terms of what role I'd be doing. So then I could never settle in, as we do in performances, settling in, or it's possible to settle in a kind of a role. So it's something that kept developing and changing, and also the physical aspect of it being so difficult as well meant you had to keep going, and otherwise you would miss this bottle that flies across the stage and hits a light, which might have happened once, but yeah. So that was kind of the piece. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, really.
No, how did it feel performing that piece compared to other works that you've performed before? Was there a different sense of like, was there a difference in how you felt as a performer? Was there a difference in how the stage looked, or how you interacted with your fellow performers? Like, was there something that was slightly different about this one compared to other pieces that you've done? Or is there a connection that you can make between them?
I think it's very hard for me to say there's a difference now, because like I said, I think that piece was the piece for me that changed the way that I think and the way that I am on stage. And there's something that happened to me that allowed me to constantly find ways to stay present in any work that I do. And that's whether that's just fully committing to a task, an idea, and it's in terms of what people would expect from me. There was very obvious differences, but in the terms the way that I sit within a work, I carry that kind of being that I was then through to everything that I do. And I try and kind of push it forward in what I like to see in terms of choreography, and I teach quite a lot now as well. And um, and it's, if someone doesn't give you a task, right, and it's more common that you won't have a task to do on stage in terms of the choreography. I've started to learn to give myself tasks, right? And give myself ideas and thoughts and kind of goals and objectives in everything I do. And it's something about being here and now. And that's the biggest thing for me. Being here and now is something that yeah, like I've said a couple of times, that's really pushed me through. And yeah.
Really cool, really cool. I'm gonna hop over to Molly now
Yeah.
because you've also been involved in a creation with Jorge that from what I know about it, I think it's a very similar sort of experience of a really impossible task or a really challenging task that is that demands quite a lot from you as a performer. So do you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, or a series of them, kind of one after the other. Yeah, very similar to Nathan. It's interesting thinking about it now, because I went through this creation and performed this piece before I did the training, and I was in the second edition, and then I did the second edition. So actually, before coming onto here, I was more thinking about the training and what is towards events in my understanding now. But as I sort of send myself back to that time, I'll probably echo a lot of the things that Nathan was saying, that it's one of those pieces that, you know, kind of in a performer's life, that everything sort of changes from that and during that. And a lot of the time I was thinking, I don't know what's going on, actually. I don't understand this that's going on, but it feels rich, and there's a sort of fear involved, I think, to do with the intense vulnerability that was coming up through the tasks we were doing, and the conversations we were having. What Jorge was bringing out, what Jorge was asking of us, he was doing himself. And I think that was really, really key to kind of allowing myself anyway to go on this journey, whatever it was. Is there is this kind of incredible transparency that was happening on Jorge's part, and kind of honest, I guess, interest and involvement in every individual, and so then the collective, and so then the creation. And I don't know, it was just layers on layers on how the self meets the other, and how we were creating the piece. And we were so heavily involved in the creation of the actual materials. Jorge was there kind of, you know, giving the beginnings of things, but giving us incredible space to just try, to just try. And then question, and then try again, and then question, and then answer, and then be lost when we couldn't answer. And yeah, this kind of constant investigation, questions of how do we get there, where are we now, was, yeah, it was amazing. I hadn't had that experience before.
Sounds a bit similar to like giving yourself tasks, as like what Nathan was describing, of like it's a you have the environment, and then how you're acting within that environment, how you're responding in that environment, how have you created yourself into that point where you are in that environment, you have to deal with that environment, and then you have to get out of that environment to then enter it again.
Yeah.
Molly, could you describe what you were doing in the piece, like practically?
Yeah, we were going through a series of different tasks that it was, how do I describe it? We were holding our breath. Yeah, we were holding our breath and finding different ways to hold our breath or constrict the flow of air, and then letting the breath back into us, and that would change then what we would do next. And this breathing and not breathing, how that affected the body very physically. And it really did something to your kind of consciousness, your awareness, the tingling of your fingers, all of this thing. So it was a series of different scores that we had created from these prompts of how do we breathe, how do we not breathe, how do we hyperventilate. I'm trying to think of different ones that maybe Jorge, you can remember.
I remember that we have kind of like different, let's say, scenarios about where the lack of breath could be the main character, as we were saying. And I remember it was narrative, it was visual, it was auditory,
right.
it was tactile. So we created kind of like a series of departments. And it's like, okay, how you can create something in the department where the lack of breath is the main character.
Yeah. I remember because we were actually hoping that it could become an installation rather than a performance on a stage where the audience is in one place. And we weren't able to do that. We weren't allowed. So we had to make it, if we wanted to perform it, we had to make it on the stage. And that was such an interesting process as well. Like, how do you still create the thing that by this point, when we were told we couldn't do it as we hoped, we were, every single person, so personally invested because we were creating the material and going to these very vulnerable places, having these long 3-hour conversations at some points. And then, oh, you can't do it as you imagined, as you intended, as you hoped, as we've been working for. And how do you reconcile that and still give it everything, give your full commitment to the piece that wasn't supposed to be like that? That was such a great journey for me personally. And actually by the end, it did feel like an installation, even though it was in this black box situation in terms of the timing and the atmosphere that we created between everyone. But I loved this, how much stakes we all had in it. So the individual, the collective thing was so entwined together. It just wouldn't have been the same if just one person was missing. And I just think that was so beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds like the piece and you within it ended up having like such a identity, but then also there's like a massive amount of ownership between all of the performers in that group to the piece and to the idea. But then also the piece is like there's an owner, like there's kind of the shared ownership of the piece, and then also in the circumstances that it's being performed in, how do you manage it, and then how do you adjust and make the shifts. And I'm curious, Nathan, did you have a similar experience? Because you performed 36 and you've also rehearsal directed with it. Was there any instances where you came across a kind of similar sort of performance drama where logistics get in the way and perhaps the institutions where you're performing say, well, actually health and safety?
Well, I mean, this was 11 years ago, so my memory's a bit hazy. But I can't remember, to be totally honest, if there was a time where we wanted to do something and then we couldn't. Was there something?
Do you remember what was the content of the bottles in the first season?
Oh yeah.
We wanted to be water.
Yeah.
They didn't allow us to have water in the bottles. They had to put shampoo because they said that shampoo doesn't conduct electricity. So if one of the bottles were to explode or to open in the middle of the stage, so imagine for 3-6 months rehearsing with water and then go to a semi-liquid that has a completely different behavior. The dancers were about to just throw themselves through the window.
It's like you get used to like how, because we spent so long with these bottles, right? These were like our babies. They were like, we just learned everything about them, how to throw them in the most perfect manner so that they just fly through the space horizontally and you can catch them. And then this, everything changes and you go, okay, we just spent all that time. But I think as well, because of the actual training we went through, and it was a training, right? When we first created it and then when we were in it, it was a training that we had to do with these bottles. And I'd always remember Jorge often compared some of the sections to basketball, you know. So we'd be doing, there was a section called basketball, you know, drills and drills with these bottles and warm-ups with these bottles, and it was a very different way of working, actually, in terms of making a piece in dance. It was good.
Yeah, and like I'm curious then with both of you, because obviously these have been very like intense experiences and very stylized and highly designed experiences that Jorge's created, and I will get to in a little bit, Jorge. I'm very curious, and this has been thinking, and this is just a indulgent question on my part. So you have these very specific experiences, very highly designed. You've developed skills because, as Nathan, you said, it's a training to perform in this piece. You have to, and Molly, those long conversations with people of going in and out and figuring out how to navigate what's coming up, how to navigate what's coming up, all of those sorts of things. It's a training. So you've built it up, you've rehearsed it, and more than it becoming like a piece that you just know like the back of your hand, it's almost like you've trained yourself to be able to be in this piece. I'm curious, listening to each other's conversations, do you think you have the tools to be able to perform in the other piece?
That's so interesting. It's hard to know, right, without knowing exactly what the piece is. But I think it, to a certain extent, yes, because of the way I think you know how Jorge approaches things, and the kind of the steps that we'd go through. I think it would be tough just to go into a piece, right? But I think that I can imagine, if maybe not physically but mentally, yes. Physically, I think maybe they will require very different things in terms of I don't know, yeah, what it requires. But I think going through the mental process of the work, I think for sure.
Yeah, I would say very, very similar. I mean, physically, from what I've seen of this piece, it's really different to Agonal. So there would be a different physical training, but it is about the mental emotional state, and how to be with that, and how to, it is a sort of changing that as well. There is a, well, I guess you talk about it all the time, is designing the presence, which is part of it, but it's being with it and staying with it. And I think because of that experience, and then also doing the Tours Vivencia training, I would go into any of Jorge's work with, I think, with such a readiness, perhaps more than any other choreographer, actually, because of this, yeah, just a readiness to be there. Like I said, we were so involved in the actual making of the material. We just had to show up and be there every day, and things happened, and crazy things happened, and we were a passionate group of people. It wasn't always easy, but this kind of just really showing up and being there, you needed everybody to be a part of that. And I have that sense with all of Jorge's other works, that if I was in another work, it would be because I should be there, and I would just have to come with a readiness. And I think that's probably the same of anyone.
Yeah, and if you had to put your finger on it, what would you say that readiness is composed of for you specifically?
I think there's something that Jorge said to me, I think I was in third year, that's stuck with me, and I say to my students now, actually, is it was the piece, you know, with the black skirts. You remember that in third year? And we were waiting at the side, and we were talking about when you're ready to step on stage or step into a space. and the idea of you stepping there before you step there, make that decision. And for me, that's something that has stuck with me, and I think that's it for me, is it's a choice, and I make that choice to be here and ready and stay here. um yeah, my choice, I guess.
Really, really beautiful. It's really nice. And really nice that you're also continuing to share it with the next generation, because we need more performers to have that agency, you know?
I swear, Jorge, I should be your spokesperson. I think at the moment I must have mentioned your name, at least a couple of times a month to someone. I'll invoice you.
Thank you. I will tell your people to talk to my people about the invoice. Yep.
And Molly, what's that readiness for you? What does that consist of?
I mean, I will plus one what Nathan said. The choice is a huge part of it. When I ask myself that, it's really hard to find the words, because it's so bodily, but embodied. It's a feeling of really holding yourself in one image. And there is this projection thing that happens, which is the choice, or the imagining you're going to step before you step. And then it's the being there, seeing that happen, and then it's the stepping. So you're almost experiencing it twice even. And it's just this long drawn out kind of experience, and this knowingness with the unknown as well. Like, there's so much contradictions whenever I try to talk about this kind of work and towards Vivencia. It's really nice where these places where you're drawing things together, like the individual and the collective, or in terms of time, we talk about presence, performance presence all the time, but so much in the over the course or over the methodology is actually thinking about dreaming, it's the future, it's projecting forward, or it sends you back in reflection, you're thinking in the past. And so actually you are very much on this linear walk and saying, yes, here we are, but here we are. And so it's this great kind of bringing it in and out. And yeah, what it's this, it's like opening up and an awareness and a readiness. Oh, there I am saying readiness again. It's a choice. Just what Nathan said.
No, it is hard. It is hard to describe it. Like, my own experience with Towards Vencia is very similar. It's like, it's very hard to explain what that thing is. Like, what is it that enables us to have that present state, and what is that present state? And I think part of the process of Towards Vencia and being in that kind of creative process, it is that, like, navigating it and then finding the tools to be able to then experience it bodily, because then once you do have that experience, it's like, okay, yes, of course, I know what it is. And like, even if we don't have the language necessarily for it, we can be it, and that puts it out in the world, and it's there and explains it. It's a bit hard to do it audibly, of course, and we're on a podcast, but you know what I mean. It's like, there's that, like, that being that is just there, and it's definitely present, because I've watched both of you perform. I've had the great privilege of watching both of you perform, and I see it. It's definitely like, there's something about the way that both of you approach the stage that is just being, and you're there, you're totally there.
I think something that it's really helped me do, and this was a conversation I was having a couple of days ago, is that it's allowed me to be confident in me, and what I provide and give on stage. And what it's done is kind of wipe away any doubt or worry of other people's opinions and thoughts about what I'm doing. And what it's allowed me to do is just do it and know that I'm doing it, and this is how I do it. And so it's in that sense, it's just made me feel like, especially when I'm on stage, is that I'm here now and I'm doing this the way that I'm doing it, and this is what you get. There you go. And that's really something that it's brought alive for me. Sure.
Something I was thinking about earlier is that I feel like Towards Vencia has become a bit like a score, but for like a life score. So we use scores loads in dancing, and it's really useful to use scores and to give yourself some parameters, and you can just free yourself up creatively, and it can give you a kind of detachment to the material as well. Not that there's anything wrong with being attached to material, but sometimes it can get in your way, and using a score of these are the parameters, you can let go and actually go so much further. And this kind of Towards Vencia is a bit like that. The methodology is a bit like that, where you can give yourself these kind of parameters or checkboxes or like a cheat sheet or something, that if you just check into these things, it's there as a map if you let it to be there, if you use it. Yeah.
Totally. So, Dr. Crecis, the composer of this score and methodology, just wanted to get a little bit of your 2 cents. How, just because we've been talking about your work for the last half an hour, I'm just curious, what it's like to hear from the inside of what it is to experience your work, and if this was maybe the aim of the methodology or the aim of your choreographic practice for these two wonderful beings that we have here with us to experience what they are experiencing in your work and to have those tools embedded in them.
Yes.
Ta-da! Ta-da!
I'll expand. Well, actually, your second question kind of like answered the first one, because what I was thinking that I was really happy to hear that actually the aim of both pieces was actually to train that presence, and I cannot stress enough how important is for me that idea of the training. So to hear that through the daily practice in the studio, it's something that you are ready to, when that piece happened, for you to be able to perform it. That is exactly what the aim was, because I keep thinking that those pieces, of course, they had to be presented. And I remember mainly in Agonal, it was a moment that I had to confess to the people, like, I need to ask the permission. It's like, can I destroy your work somehow for me to be the first member of the audience, for this to have a shape, for them to be able to see something? Because as Molly was saying, it was built as an installation. So each of them were having their own individual journeys. Literally, they have their what we call the rite of passage. And they had the beginning, a middle of an end, with some connection in between them as performers. And that was a total chaos. I remember talking to them after the first run through of those rite of passages simultaneously at the same time, that they all felt amazing, felt transformative. It felt that they were fulfilling and they were owning the work. But from outside, it didn't make sense. It almost feel like we were in a mental institution with just people nearly banging their heads against the wall for no reason. And it makes sense for all of them because they had a journey, but from outside didn't. So I had to ask them permission. It's like, okay, guys, now I need to have your permission to do that. And it was difficult because I felt a huge responsibility of kind of like betraying the work that they've been doing. But somehow and secretly, and something that it was very happy for me now to hear it, something that I was stressing a lot is like, it doesn't matter because you've already done the journey. You've already have done your rite of passage. You've already has been transformed. So actually how it looks like now it will not have to modify what your experience of it is, because you've already gone through the training. And luckily, it was that like that. It was a certain resistance of that change, but if I'm correct, Molly, you can correct me, from what I remember, after destroying those rite of passages and created a visual experience for the audience, because that was not only research, we had the responsibility to show something to the audience. I have the feeling that everyone was able, with a little bit of work, of course, to go back to those journeys, even if the path was different.
Yeah. Actually, it's amazing that you use this word betrayal, because it sounds so severe, but it's absolutely what I felt. At one point, there was one transition. I even remember where I'm standing in the studio, where I felt this kind of like deep sinking in my body. Like, I can't believe you're doing this, Jorge. Up until now, I've supported everything. No. And I sat with it and I waited, and then eventually I remember speaking to you about it, and not even knowing how to express what I felt, because it felt irrational as well. You know, we're okay, come on, but it's also just we're making a piece and we're going to perform it. But it was because by that point it was so personal, and I was in that transition part of the rite of passage, but I didn't know it. And like any transition, whether it's, I don't know, from high school to university, from that transition in childbirth, whatever transition, that there's a complete disorientation, a fear, and a need to kind of grasp something solid. And in that conversation with you, where I was basically expressing, I don't like what's changed, and I'm not, it doesn't feel good, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to get past it. You said to me, just be there, just stay there. You didn't ask me to hurry up out of the transition. I didn't know it was the transition, and you didn't call it that. I'm calling it that now. You said be there in the anger, be pissed off with me, with the work, with the school, whatever. And so in that moment, then you were the solid thing that I could kind of have there, be tethered to. And I had this, whatever that was, and I transitioned into the piece, and I realized actually I hadn't finished whatever circle it was I'd started, and it needed to end up back in the collective. It needed to end up back in the group, in this case, the class, because it wouldn't have been full. Because although we were going on individual journeys, we were side by side, being witnessed by all of these other students and Jorge in the room every single day. And it wouldn't have finished if we hadn't arrived together at some point. And then the arrival was a new journey, actually. It was beginning again. And then we performed it, and then it was different again. And then we performed it, and it was different again. And yeah. What were we talking about?
We were talking about that
Yeah.
journey, that for me, when Bridget was asking me what was the goal of it, because I cannot stress enough how the training is, and as you were saying, Molly, was really, really helpful for me to hear, like it's a life score, because by going through those steps that now I have them very clear, which we will go through them next week, which is acquiring the skills, collateral training, the mystification, the playfulness, the doer, the unitasking, the reflection, the cool down, and the celebration. By going through those steps every single day or through the journey, it didn't matter what the journey was, because it was that transformation afterwards. So, and just hearing Nathan and Molly, hearing how that training infused something on them that now they can replicate it almost at will when it happens, that's the job done.
And on that note, with replicating it at will, whenever you need it, however you need it, have either of you, and Jorge, you can answer this question as well because you experienced the methodology yourself. Has there ever been a moment where that those steps and that tool have just kind of like surprisingly come into your life and you've said, I need to use this now. I'm using it now. Oh, thank God I used it because it really served the circumstance that I was in. So not necessarily in a performance context, perhaps maybe like a life situation. You're walking down the street and maybe a pigeon did their business on you. I don't know. Like, was there just some kind of like random experience where you're like, oh, that's Towards Vency is coming into my life right now, and this is the experience that I'm having. And yeah, cool.
I think for me personally, and this is something I was thinking about earlier on, and it's kind of a slight question as well, is um I don't know if it's because I I haven't gone through the training. I haven't actually done the training as the program. I've experienced it through being next to Jorge and how he works and being in work and stuff. But I can find it like this on stage. As soon as I step off the stage or out of my creative world, let's say, so it's not just on the stage, but when I'm me is when I can't find it and I don't know how to, and I lose that kind of idea of this confident performer-esque thing that I was talking about earlier disappears almost. And I don't know why. Is it societal? Am I don't know. And yeah, like I said, I don't know if it's because I haven't been through it yet, or maybe it would help. Um, but it's something that especially this year, but I've been trying to find this idea of being here now and not kind of letting my thoughts and mind kind of distract me from that. But it's obviously it's not easy to do all the time anyway. But it's something I haven't found yet for me, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, this year has definitely presented a lot of unique challenges that we all must um, address. Jorge, is there anything you want to say to that?
Yes. Well, the first one is like, Nathan, it would be my pleasure to invite you to any of the editions that you would like to take part. You'll be my guest, and it would be fantastic to have you through the training. Because when Bridget was asking the question, I was thinking, I don't even know if Nathan is familiar with the vocabulary that we're using, with the mystification, with the doer, with the unitasking, because it was such an early on that the thesis was not written, and only afterwards I made sense of all the steps of the repetitions of the series, and Molly just experienced it a tiny bit as a creative process, much more mature, much more seasoned. And of course, when she went through the training as it was just as it is. So it's now shaped. For me particularly, just going through it for 20 years, there's something that has changed. Two things mainly that has been quite surprising, which I was not expecting. I was someone I've been someone always with a huge imposter syndrome. I was the smallest person in the company, most of the time the youngest. When I was started teaching at the place, I was under 30 with only 5 or 6 years of a professional experience as a dancer. So I always feel like, what am I doing here? Those movers are much better than me. When I start choreographing, it's like, I don't have any formation in education. I did the PhD when I don't even have a master's. So always it says, I am not enough. So by going through the methodology through a very difficult period of my life in 2015, 16, and 17, and performing a piece as my rite of passage, which some of you knows, I was skipping on the rope for 45 minutes like a boxer while I was delivering a text. So all of those pieces has that in common. It's a very, very intense physical experience. But all of them has something that we haven't talked too much tonight, which is about being very playful. It's almost, it's not a game, because that's not a game. It's about being playful, and that's something that I was not able to touch upon outside of my performative life, as Nathan was saying. As a performer, I was able to because I felt confident. Then as a teacher, I was kind of, but not fully. But going through the methodology, it's something that it has made my life much easier because now I can trigger that on and off. And then the second thing is the pragmatism. So all those pieces has in common as well. Is like throw the bottle, hold your breath, jump on the rope, as simple as it is. And that pragmatism actually surprised me hugely a week, 10 days ago, when I had to spend a few days in hospital doing some tests and then a night in hospital for a minor surgery. And I'm going to confess in this openly live that I normally faint. So I'll go to hospitals and I faint because of the smell, because I feel that it's not against me. I don't know if you know these guys, but it was a little minor accident at the place with one of the students. I had a minor concussion. The ambulance came and I had to step out of the corridor and I faint on the corridor because of the presence of the paramedics and the ambulance. So it's just beyond me. I just flew through hospital 2 weeks ago and 10 days because I was playful, it was pragmatic, it was fun. I was having a nice conversation with the doctors and with the nurses. And then thinking about it, it's like, I am just in a hospital. As a matter of fact, it's just another room. And so I think that pragmatism kicked in really strongly 10 days ago. So yeah, playfulness and pragmatism for me has been the things that stay with me in the methodology, from the methodology.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. That's really cool. Nice one. And Molly, what about you? Have you had an experience that comes to mind?
I'll probably just say similar things. It's very easy when I feel well, and I well bodily, well mentally, emotionally. It's really easy for me to connect with this stuff, especially because so much of it is about what's already there and putting your needs, your dreams, your curiosities, your feelings, everything in the forefront of, okay, now what do you think? And then acting from that place. And so when I feel well, and I like those feelings that are going on or the situation, it's much easier. And when I'm not feeling well, even if physically I might be fine, but in other ways I'm not, it's much harder. But what's really nice about this, the simplicity of this methodology, and I know it comes from so much depth and research, that it is so pragmatic. And actually just asking myself some of the questions in this situation. So when I most of the time, if I'm thinking of towards events, yeah, it's in a situation where things are getting a bit stressful. They're getting on top of me. I've maybe got something very particular I need to do, but I don't have the clear clarity to do it, or to do it well as I would like to do it. And actually just asking myself a couple of the questions, like what do I need to get it done, the skills, or but the playfulness and the pragmatism are in bold every time, and sometimes it's only that. It's how can this be playful? It doesn't mean not taking something seriously. Well, the chapter actually is games are very serious things, but exactly, yeah, it's taking them very seriously, but you can be light and you can be amused. And if so, maybe sometimes the stressful situation is actually another person and they're very stressed or shouting at you, whatever. Maybe don't show them that you're amused. That might make it worse. But can you have a lightness to it? Can you take this is not everything and this will end kind of approach? Yeah, so it comes to me when I need it, but I would like to I'm trying not to say I should. I would like to use it because it's always there. Oh, yeah, when I need it, when I'm most unwell.
I think it's important to note also just in terms of like calling upon it when we need it. When Molly said, just for everyone who's listening, when Molly said games are a very serious thing, all four of us had this massive smile on our face. We all giggled. We all pointed at the screen. We're like, yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. We know exactly what that is. And I think just observing it, it seemed like we all recognized the importance of playfulness and that, yes, it is a serious thing. And we know the role that it has in our lives. And we also want to make sure that we give it that sort of gravitas, but also it's bloody hilarious. And like, but there's just this collective acknowledgement of what that is. And for a moment, all of us just kind of went ping. And it wasn't necessarily because we were smiling. I think it's because all of us just perhaps had that embodied memory of what that is. And it just came all of a sudden on the screen. So we all can access it. Luckily all four of us in this call have gone through the process, whether it's in a creative process or in the training methodology itself, or some of us have written a book casually, as you do. But we all have it somewhere in here, and as long as we enable ourselves the acknowledgement that we can switch it on whenever we can, it's totally possible. And I think it just happened. So that was really cool to watch.
I mean, something that blows my mind to this day. And I remember, because I think, Jorge, I was your first class, right? I was your first year that you started at the place. And I remember when he first said that, games are serious things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Games are games. It's fun, And to this day now, even when I'm working with students or I'm choreographing or anything like that, the things that you could get out of people, these really like deep and important things, and the things that people can achieve through play, through playfulness, that they never thought they were ever going to be able to get. And you go, see that? That's it there. Through this play, that's it. And they go, oh yeah. It's amazing. I will forever love this slogan. Games are very serious things, because they are.
It's also why do we call the work we make pieces? Why can't they be plays, just like enacting theatre? They're plays.
And it's in English language, it's so amazing because you can play the guitar, you play a role, you are in a play. It is such a huge word. I think dance needs to adopt it for sure.
All the world's a stage and we are but the players. Shakespeare knew it. We all know it. I'd like to. This conversation is fantastic, and we've asked Molly and Nathan to actually come to the podcast with a couple of questions, just to field with Jorge, and just also to like add to the conversation a little bit of like what would you like to expand upon in your experience? And also just for everyone who's on Facebook, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat box, and hopefully we'll be able to answer a couple of those before we finish up. But yeah, should we open it up to questions within the call, within the podcast? Would anyone like to go first? Molly.
First. Yeah, I wrote quite a few questions actually, but some of them I think we've already skirted over. So yeah, this one I'm quite interested in. But you can choose to answer both parts or just the second part. I don't know what's more interesting actually. So I wondered, to what extent is the Towards Vivencia methodology still evolving? Or maybe it's more interesting to talk about your relationship with it, especially as we've talked about how there's this lovely pragmatic, almost solidity to it, to these words, to the methodology. They just exist. Yeah.
Yes, my relationship to it, it would be very dramatic and very common to say it's a love-hate relationship, but no, it's not. It's a total love. I think I found the hobby of my lifetime. And a hobby is something that you do when you have the free time, and then it became your bubble and your escape, and it became that thing that you can talk for hours like a geeky for with many people that they don't even care about it. So actually, that tour Vivencia for me. So I have a relationship with it that it's total love, because like a really good partner, like a really good friend, like a really good book, or like a really good film, it doesn't cease to amaze me, because I strongly believe that it's not mine. I just collect bits and bobs, and like many architects or musicians or writers, they said that they are just the channel for something else to exist. I strongly believe that, because this methodology, I put it the name, I put it in paper, but it was together with 1,500 people, among them especially Nathan at the very beginning of creating it, very, very especially Bridget by giving it shape, very, very especially Molly by all those conversations that we had, that it took shape. So it's not mine. It was just shaped by all those amazing people. And to your first question, that's when I think I am so in love with it, because I still discover lots of things. We are having now the very first time the training for trainers, meaning that because the methodology is being quite in demand, not only for people who are coming to the training, but also higher education institutions are starting implementing that in as part of the curriculum. And because of the situation with the COVID, I talked to the team and we thought, what about if this, that can be something that it can be generating workshops, online courses, and it's already shaped, why we don't pass it to other people for them to generate their employment through something that they already like? And we've gathered an amazing group of 10 people, and we are going through the process of dissecting the methodology, going even deeper for them to be able to pass it on afterwards. And very, very happy, because the main goal was for them to be able to generate their employment with something that is happening. And already 2 months in, already two of them are organizing their own workshops of Towards Vivencia and their own courses. So it's been really, really successful in that sense. And I'm really happy, because once again, it keeps evolving and keeps providing new opportunities that I was not expecting a while ago. And in one of those sessions with this training for trainers, just on Saturday, I've discovered, or I rediscovered, that the methodology is called Towards Vivencia, because we experience many, many times that people in our training, mainly at the very beginning, like, but give me the money back. I'm not experiencing Vivencia. What the hell is Vivencia? They don't ask the money back, but just it's kind of like this constant fight of, you have promised me the land of the joy, and something called Vivencia, which is not even a good marketing name because we cannot pronounce it and we don't know what it is, and I don't experience it. You're driving me crazy. And we try to explain that is the experience of the experience that transforming is the presence, etc., etc., etc. But as we all have been saying, is an embodied experience, and therefore we have the language to talk about it, but only you know that you've been through that when you've been through that already. And more interestingly, I rediscovered, I reclaimed that actually the training, the name of the training is Towards Vivencia, because we are going towards that experience constantly. And that is something that I've discovered just only a couple of days ago, because once again, imposter syndrome, like, no, 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 I know what Vivencia is and you're going to experience, because I promise that the training is to go towards it. If it happens, you will know. And actually, if you don't know that it's happening, actually it's happening, because sometimes we don't realize about those changes and those situations, and that when you realize that playfulness has creeped in and you didn't realize, Vivencia is happening. When you realize that pragmatism is creeping in and you didn't realize, Vivencia is happening. So it is this is a love-hate relationship in between explaining and experiencing it. But yeah, it is a training that, without going through the first 3 painful months of what Agonal was, you couldn't have the transformation on a stage on the day of the performance, because you can teach the piece and will not have that experience of Vivencia because they haven't gone through the process. with 12 throwing bottles, you can teach that, but without going through the process, you will not have that. With through and out, skipping 45 minutes, yeah, I can send you the score in 5 minutes, and you go through that. You are not going to experience vivencia because you haven't gone through the process. So to your question, Molly, yes, something I really love is I keep discovering things, and I keep discovering things also through the people who are experiencing it, by how they talk about it, by how they experience it. But now you right now gave me an incredible line that I never know how to use it, and I never thought about it, which is a life score. It gives you that, provides that structure for you to go through this when it's necessary. So yeah, summarizing the answer, thank you for your question. Yes, it's a total love relationship, and I keep discovering every time new things, which hopefully makes things better. I want to add something else, because the other day in the training trainers, I was also thinking towards Valencia is very primitive. It's very rudimentary. In 50 years time, 100 years time, 150 years time, when people talk about a state of consciousness, they might look at the work of towards Valencia like, this is so below basic. That's the very beginning of what the mind is, what the consciousness is. But that's what we have now. That's like talking about the first wheel, when now Tesla is driving their cars by themselves, and it's using the same technology, but 10,000 times better. So yes, towards Valencia is very rudimentary, because we are at the very beginning of an incredible era of discovering what is the neuroscience, what is the mind, what is consciousness, what is the relationship, which is incredible. In 2021, we need to carry on thinking, what is the relationship between the body and the mind, which there is no relationship, it's the same, but still we don't have the language. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it, and I keep growing, and I hope to die not knowing everything that it has to be known about towards vivencia, and hopefully those trainees that are coming now, they will mix it with other things. I will take it forward. I only hope that towards vivencia is only a little stone in building an incredible monument to what being human is.
Yup, 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 yup. I hope so too.
That's a great answer.
Ethan, your question.
A couple of them have been answered already. But I kind of wondered if you, and it's in the same vein, I guess, of what the next steps of towards Ventia is. But I wondered if you were ever thinking about training people of a non-artistic profession, and let's go the opposite, like we always do in an office job, and how would that work? And is it something that you've thought? I'm sure it's something you've thought about, but if you could just let us know a bit about it.
Yes, and it already exists. We had another human being which is incredible. I need to name him here. I love him to bits. His name is Fernando Balsera. And very similar to Nathan, he was at the place many years afterwards. And when he finished, we lost track of each other. And then when we connect again, we had an amazing conversation. And he was my assistant in a 3 weeks project in China, because he was doing a master in business at the time. He said, Jorge, this methodology is something very powerful. Let's transform it into a brand, into a company, to teach people who are not performers, because now at the moment it's also quite current, like they do a speech, and they do a comedy, and they go and pick up tomatoes in companies. So we created something that at the moment it was called OWL Company, OWL, because it was the second letter of commitment, ownership, and playfulness. And that company existed for 2 or 3 years. And yes, we went to work with architects, we accountants, we even went to Madrid to teach the Apple staff in the offices in Madrid, and we had a couple of workshops. It died after a couple of years because we didn't have the language and we didn't have the network, meaning that every time that we went into the workshop, the results were amazing. Just as a little example, I was invited to be part of a summer camp here in Spain for people who were learning English, and they were kind of like thrown into an immersed situation where they were for 2 or 3 weeks only learning English. So the director of this program invited me to do a few sessions at the beginning. And I remember after 1 or 2 sessions, he said to me, "This is amazing, the result that they are having at learning English after going through your methodology, which is very different to the previous cohorts in previous year. It's much faster, it's much more playful, therefore they dare to make more mistakes, which is normally the main barrier to learn a language. They are physically active, therefore the information runs better rather than sit down and disconnect after a few minutes." And that's something that I hope to go back at some point. It is a business. And as a business, you need to count with a network, which I don't have, which I have in the dance world, but I don't have that in the companies. And the vocabulary. When we talk about playing, and when we talk about being on a stage, and when we talk about all those things, we understand immediately what it is. There is a language that I haven't found yet with those populations in order to make it accessible to them, because at the moment it is not accessible. But my hope for the future is that hopefully Towards Vivencia also contributes to what I believe is one of the futures of dance. Dance, we know that we're in a very difficult situation because of the COVID, but not only. We've been going with less and less funding over the years, less and less opportunities. And I don't believe there needs to be less dance universities or less dancers. Actually, they need to be more, because what we do is to experience that empathy, that compassion, that playfulness, that companionship, as Molly was saying, and how important is those skills are passed by people who are not able to train that. And they're not able because they have to do other things, in the same way that I'm not able to do the bread because I cannot wait at 5 o'clock in the morning to amass my own bread. And I'm really grateful to the person who do that, and it's available for me in the bakery. And I'm very grateful to the person who collects the tomatoes, and I'm very grateful to the person who drives the bus. And all of us has activities who complement others' activities and provide services and possibilities that we all cannot do, because it is impossible that one person can do all those things. So dancers, we have a very specific place in society which we haven't claimed yet, or not claimed fully, I believe. And we haven't claimed it because we don't have the language, because lots of many barriers. But I think those barriers are falling down, and I hope that one of those goals of those trainers is to start training people who are not in the performing arts world. And I'm very lucky that at the moment I am also partnering with David Thunder, which is a therapist, a manual therapist, an osteopath by training, and he helps people to heal. Well, right now we are also, once the people are healed and they are out of pain, we help them to create a physical rite of passage with this methodology to upgrade what we call their human suit, not only the body, but the mind, the spirit. And I believe that is an incredible future in there, not only emotionally and ethically, but also financially. Why not? And yeah, hopefully we are going to start opening those doors more and more.
Great. Yeah.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, another question I was thinking about is, apart from the playfulness and the pragmatism that I've really taken from the methodology, the other thing that comes up a lot for me is this idea of the north, the intention, the direction. And I wanted to ask, what do you have tools or things that you always go through? Maybe Bridget, you can answer this as well. When that north gets muddy, how do you try to make it clear again, to make that decision? Because the thing that I find is when I have the clear north, the rest of the methodology just kind of blah, 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 falls into place. And even if it's a very challenging thing that I'm trying to do, it's much easier because I have clarity, even if it's a direction, not a destination, like you were talking about. But when it's muddy, yeah, that's really hard. So either Bridget or Jorge, I don't know if you want to say something about it.
I would say, Bridget, you want to start, and then I can geek out a little bit about it.
Of course, we want to give you as many opportunities to geek out as possible. Interestingly enough, my experience with my own North is that it doesn't
Shall we explain what the North is for those who are not familiar?
Let's explain the North. So the North is a direction that the participants find in the training. So the way that the training program is set up is we spend the first 13 weeks developing the basic skills of the methodology. So what Jorge was saying earlier of collateral training, demystification, unitasking, et cetera, which you can get tasters of next week in his class. So once we have those tools, then we use those tools to figure out what area specifically we want to work on. We do various different exercises to kind of bypass the prefrontal cortex and to kind of, use the nervous system as a way to pinpoint what it is we're trying to, what is it in our lives that we want to head towards? What's the thing that we want to really address? And so one of the big things that we do is we do like reflective writing on once we come up with these words through a specific physical task and reflective task. It's like a series of 3 words, maybe a little bit more. I think mine's 4. Anyway, you do a little bit of reflective writing on what happens if you, like in the next 5 years, if you don't go towards your north, so you head in the opposite direction towards your south. And not to say that the south is bad or anything. The south is where the sun is, but it's just the opposite direction of where you want to head. And then we do the opposite, which is heading towards your north. So what will your life look like if you head towards the direction of your north? Again, it's not the final destination. It's the means by which you get there. So if you're wandering around in the desert and you have your compass, you know where north is, you want to head north. That's the way that you want to go. So for me, my north is, when I first discovered it, it initially wasn't, as the word itself didn't really seem to fit. And I reached out to Jorge and said, it's not quite there yet. I can feel it somewhere in my gut, but it's not quite there. And so then Jorge asked me a couple questions of like, well, where do you see yourself? And what happens if you don't follow it? And I said something very, very clear of like, what is the biggest barrier that I have? And then Jorge reorganized those words a little bit. And that became my north. And the specific words that I use for my north are, I do deserve to be. It's a very personal one for me, and everyone's north is very personal. And that north came to me, I think it was just a moment of the stars aligning based on the work that I had done in the training that led me up to that moment, and that I was speaking to the right person at the right time, and I was present in the moment in the right time, and all of my Vivencia cylinders were firing, and it just, boom, I found the north that really was going to serve me for the rest of my life. And so I would say that my north never gets muddy. I just forget it sometimes. And I think the rest of the world gets really muddy. And that's where my challenge comes in with maintaining it post the training. In that, old habits kind of creep in, and, old ways of being, like who I was before the training, kind of knocks at the door, or there's certain circumstances where just based on who I am as a person and the survival instincts that I built up as a person, they kick in. And then I have to remind myself, oh yeah, I have this tool that is really, really powerful. And there was the significance behind it in the work that I did with Jorge to find it. And I'm like, aha, I got it. This is the thing that's going to take me out of this. And as soon as I'm reminded of that, then I am reminded of all of the tools that Towards Vencia gave me. And then it's the process of me implementing those tools. So I think it's kind of similar to what Nathan was saying earlier of like, you know, the work that you do before you go on the stage. It's almost like the north is the thing that goes, oh yeah, this is what I have to do. That's what's going to help me go onto stage. And so even when it's not in a stage circumstance, it's like as soon as I remind myself of my north, it's almost like everything kicks into high gear and I'm able to make those decisions. So rather than it, yeah, I think it's the rest of the world that's the problem. My north is fine. No, but it's like again, it's managing that when the outside world um changes your circumstances. We can't control the world. We can't control the beautiful stage managers that we love and respect that say you can't use water because it's a conductive thing, you have to use shampoo. We can't, we can't control people saying you have to do the piece on stage, you can't do it in the lobby. Like we can't control those aspects of our life, but what we can control is how we experience it and how we then, dance with it. How do we find our way to be present in that moment to then, and not try to change it, but just be ourselves and navigate it with all of the strength and wisdom that we have.
And as Bridget was kind of like explaining, probably it come across that arriving to that north, to those four words, it's not an easy task. And the training towards Vencia as a training methodology, what we are going to be doing next week is kind of like learning the basics. And once again, just for all of us, because we are familiar with this knowledge, with this vocabulary, if we are talking about fitness, next week we will learn how to do push-ups, how to run properly, how to work your upper body skills and your core. So are kind of like the bricks and the components of fitness. And then what do you do with them? So you might go to someone, a specialist, a physiotherapist, or a personal trainer, and it teach you how to do properly push-ups, how to do properly abdominals, how to do running properly. But once you have those skills, what do you do with them? Do you want to climb the Everest? Do you want to run a marathon? Do you want to what do you want to do with it? But with towards Valencia, it's a little bit the same. We talk about the components of peak performance presence, that state of consciousness. But then what do you want to do with it? You want to perform? Do you want to how do you want it to serve your life? And that is a massive task. It's a huge to make that decision. And as soon as you said it, you might well panic because that is a huge mountain to climb. So what towards Vencia as a trainer, what we try to do, and maybe Molly answering your question, is to try to break it down as a small task as possible. And the very first one is sometimes it's muddy. Sometimes we cannot see beyond what is urgent for us, what is right in our face. If I have pain in my bum or in my belly now after the surgery, I cannot think about serving my students as best as I can because I am much more preoccupied by my pain. Or many other examples, if I preoccupy because I cannot pay my rent, I might not be able to be as present with my partner. And this is the moment that I'm going to geek out. This is in our prefrontal cortex, exactly right here in the very first thing, because that's where the immediate thoughts are generated for you to survive. Run faster or you will miss the bus. And then if you miss the bus, you're going to kick out of the job. If you kick out of the job, you're going to die alone under a bridge. That is a normal process that we all follow in order to avoid to die. As simple as that. It's a basic survival instinct. Get into the worst case scenario for you to try to avoid the worst case scenario. That's a human trait. Once you know that, and this is what we do in Towards Vivencia, there are mechanisms through physical action, which is that's the power of dance as well, that we as choreographers, we can design movements in order to serve for something. Most of the times, dance serve for visual pleasure, but dance can be much more, which is accessing memories, accessing emotions, accessing the states of consciousness. So what we do is we design exercises. In this case is something that we call MASA, M-A-S-A, mobilization, activation, strength, and activation, which in 15 minutes gets you drenched, completely tired. Therefore, it kind of like shut down that prefrontal cortex of survival because you are so tired that you are not there anymore. Therefore, your thoughts can go into the temporal lobe, where much more long-term desires and long-term goals are storage, and that is closer where your goal is. And that's one of the exercises that day in and day out, once again, because it's a training we do in towards Vivencia. And by that, at the end of, I don't remember if it's a week or 2 weeks, you gather 4 words. And those 4 words are the beginning of what could be your north. But before we arrive toward north, there is a couple of more processes of conscious writing, of more exercises. So as you were saying, Molly, life is muddy and our thoughts are not clear, and just thinking that we need to design north is a massive, daunting, and therefore we normally procrastinate to get that task. So because it's really big, it's too big. So in Towards Valencia, all the time is about making it smaller, making it smaller, making it smaller. The first one is get over your urgent and to go into the long term. Once you go into the long term, dream. What is the thing that makes your belly happy and your heart smile? What are the things that makes you scared and afraid? And going through that process, little by little, we start shaping what that north is. So my suggestion now in this conversation, if when it gets muddy, it's a really good sign, because it's like, okay, now I know that I don't know what the north is, but now I know what the process might be to find the new one. So let's go through the process. And also with this mental work, and I'm going to call it mental, although it's not real, but with this area of our lives that it's much more closer to our thought process and being, we think that is going to be immediate. Okay, think about that and it will happen. When we know that to run a marathon, you need 2 years in order to get there. Well, to get certain mental clarity, you probably need 6 weeks or 10 weeks. So when it gets muddy, thumbs up, big smile, big playfulness is like, okay, this is the time to get my shorts, my running shoes, and let's start going through the process in order to clear and to find out another north. So if it gets muddy, congratulate yourself, because it's like, okay, this is the moment that I know that I need to do the work. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yeah, you absolutely are, both of you. Thanks.
That was like I said, I've not actually been through the training, but it resonates so much with me, and then in I don't know, I don't know, because I've again, I've worked with you a lot, but also just recently, there is times when things are happening and it's like, okay, and then if I exercise, it's amazing what it can do for you, actually. Yeah, but that was really, really useful to hear.
When it gets muddy, get sweaty.
Yeah, I mean, I can sweat just by walking down the stairs. I need to like get extra sweaty.
Sorry, Molly, we cut you. I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say it's very interesting because, I mean, it shows the fact that I even asked the question that maybe I'm in that place that is a bit more muddy, and have been for a few weeks, and something happened, I don't know what, a couple of weeks ago, and there was this transition, and I'd be getting my running shorts on, and I've been doing a lot more physically without knowing why or what for or for when or for, and but it's a need, and it's almost like my body's saying, well, we'll do this and the rest will clear up, actually. And it's just that my body's so smart. It does it before my mind does.
It is. You've been working so much with it, and here's the offer as well. If you feel that at some point it's useful, I think the Facebook group in which you were part of, because for people who doesn't know, when we run the training, everyone belongs to a close Facebook group in which we post the units, the task, and people go through those tasks for a year. And we never close those groups because people likes to go back to the reports or what happened, something like that, and they're all organized in units. So just as a suggestion, if at some point it helps, you can always go back to that process of when you first discover your north, and it's like, well, I'm going to go through this process again. And I know, and this is the beauty of having a methodology. which at the end of the day, methodology is only a map, but I know that this map will take me at least 4 weeks to get there, or 8 weeks if I do it every 2 weeks, but I know the steps, and therefore there is one thing less that you need to worry about. What is my north? Well, those are the steps that I need to find, rather than to have to worry. I don't know what is my north and what do I need to do in order to find it. So there is one worried already.
Yeah, I just love this feeling of the methodology, the community, the other participants on my edition, but also on other ones. It's there for you, and it's there for you if you want it, if you let it, in these different ways. And it's great to be reminded of that.
Which actually you are giving me just the link for I think what I think would be a perfect end, which towards Vivencia as a methodology, and it works, and something set up that it's here to serve you. It's here to serve the people who wants to go through that and train their performance presence. But there is only one way that the methodology can serve you, and it's if you make the work for the methodology to serve you. So you are the only one who can go through it and make it happen. So let's make it happen next week. Let's start having a little bit of 1 hour and a half of fun of to see what those bricks are.
Let's make it happen. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Molly and Nathan and Jorge, for spending the last hour and a half chatting about all of the amazing things that we're doing. I feel very full and very energized as well. That the make it happen energy is very, very strong right now. We've got a question coming in from Facebook. One last question, I believe. Yes. When is the next training happening? The next training, hugs from Canada. Hello. The next training is going to be starting on the 25th of April, and enrollment is going to be opening actually next week with the start of Jorge's classes. We are a very friendly company, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and send us a message on Facebook or Instagram, or email us, ask any questions that you have. And yeah, we'll have lots of other events as well, where we're going to just be chatting with some people, going into some more information. There's also the book that Jorge and I wrote, if you want to get a little bit more information about training. But definitely join us next week, where it's definitely going to be like a big taster. There's the book. Hey. Join us next week, because it's really going to be a really nice practical embodiment of everything that we've been talking about in the course of the thing. Nathan, you were going to say something.
Well, it's gone.
That's all right. No worries. Cool. Well, thank you everyone, and hopefully we'll get to meet as a in person soon. And just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been amazing to have you guys in here, and I was thinking about that, and I want to say that publicly acknowledge that the three of you are the living proof of another 1,500 to 2,000, 10,000 people who contribute to make this methodology happening. So I want to personally show you my appreciation and my gratitude to the three of you, because towards Vivencia it is what it is today because of what you made of it, and you represent so many other dancers who contribute to that. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
I also just want to say just thanks for everything that you're doing, both of you together, with Towards Vivencia and how it's growing, and with the classes you're doing. We've managed to not talk about the pandemic in this time, which is just incredible. Congratulations, but I'm going to break that. But the stuff that you've been doing and continuing, and the conversations you've been starting, I think it gives a lot of courage to the freelance world, and that's quite powerful stuff. So yeah, thanks for that, Jorge and Bridget. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I hope our paths will cross soon again. Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.